What's going on, brothers and sisters? Chris here from Namaste Gaming, and today we're going to be looking at the recent balance changes to the Mesmer profession. As I mentioned in the previous video where I covered the Warrior and Ellie changes, I do try to play all 8 professions, which unfortunately kind of leaves me in the position of Jack of all trades and Master of none. With that in mind, if you guys notice somewhere that I've misinterpreted something or made a mistake, please don't hesitate to let me know in the comments, and of course feel free to jump in and theorycraft or discuss the changes in the comments as well. The patch notes are in the description if you want to play along from home. Let's get to it. So, while the weapon changes don't really affect the available builds all that much, it is worth noting that Greatsword is doing a lot better post-patch thanks to the buff to Phantasmal Berserker and the fix to the whole clone stealing might thing that was introduced on Mirror Blade in the previous patch. Mainhand Sword got a little nerfy, but it's still amazing, and Scepter got better for condition builds and a bit worse for power builds due to the illusionary counter change. If you're usually the type to ignore Signets, you may want to check out the new and improved Signet of Midnight as well, since a stun break with a 5-second blind attached to it is really nothing to sneeze at. As far as trait changes, well, those do affect the builds. The change to Prismatic Understanding in the Chaos line made the previously annoying but only slightly effective stealth build into a much tougher target that can afford to focus a little more on gearing for damage after the change, and Mantras received a tiny buff with an extra 150 toughness tacked on to protected Mantras from dueling, and indirectly from Furious Interruption, also in Chaos, and the damage increase on Halting Strike in Domination. Scepter-based condition builds also got a decent buff, with Malicious Sorcery getting another 150 condition damage to make their Torment and Confusion hit even harder. Of course, the real kick in the teeth for Mesmers this patch was Illusionist's Celerity. Previously, it was a borderline mandatory 5-point trait that reduced the recharge on amazing abilities like Phase Retreat, Decoy, Mirror Blade, Illusionary Counter, basically any skill that created any kind of illusion at all. Notice how none of the abilities I listed were phantasms? I've heard a lot of non-Mesmers respond to this change saying, good, Phantasm build was OP, so that trait needed a nerf. And they're partially right. Phantasm builds were fairly OP. I should know, I play one, and a tanky Phantasm build shouldn't lose too often 1v1 in World v World, and carries into dungeons nicely as long as you have a decent set of Berserker armor. Losing Illusionist's Celerity didn't really change that though. What the IC nerf did was the exact opposite of the stated design goal for this patch. It reduced build variety instead of increasing it. The 2 most played builds prior to the patch, Shattercat and Phantasms, are still the 2 most played builds after the patch, but now they're even more heavily saturated because every Divergent build that was reasonably powerful thanks to the accessibility of IC is now 20% weaker. To top it off, the IC change did nothing to address the lack of coherence in the Inspiration and Illusions lines. Inspiration is clearly intended to be the line for those of us who enjoy keeping 3 Phantasms up as often as possible without shattering them, but half the traits either don't fit a Phantasm build properly or run counter to the notion of keeping Phantasms alive due to encouraging frequent shatters. Both of the Grandmaster traits require you to shatter your Phantasms to make use of them, which is just baffling to say the least. Meanwhile, while Illusions is slightly more sensible, it still suffers from a bit of a dual identity, being both the primary conditions line as well as the mandatory line for shatter builds. I apologize for getting on a bit of a rant here, but it honestly does my head in to try to figure out how they thought this would improve build diversity. The only conclusion I can come to is that they feel like Mesmer build diversity was fine as is, but the profession as a whole needed a nerf. And granted, they had more build diversity than say Warriors or Elementalists pre-patch, so if 3 good builds is what they're aiming for, I guess I can see why they called it a day, but I would have liked to see nerfs that targeted the actual OP elements of the two more popular builds, rather than a blanket cooldown reduction that, funnily enough, the two most popular builds are most easily able to deal with. Is the class broken? Of course not. It's still going to be one of the top 3 most desired classes in pretty much every area of the game, but let's not kid ourselves. A large part of that is due to how powerful and versatile our utility skills are. Do other classes have bigger problems? Yes, definitely. Warriors still suffer from sustainability issues, Ellies are pretty much required to spend 30 points in Arcane for any build intended to fight other players, and Rangers are pretty much the red-headed stepchildren of this game as soon as they step foot outside of SPVP, with the possible exception of 1 or 2 very specific World v World builds. You know what, though? None of that changes how poorly the Mesmer changes affected build variety, and for anyone currently maining a Mesmer, that sucks. With luck, we'll see them revisit these changes in the next balance patch, and maybe tweak things to be a little more well-rounded as far as evening out build strength goes. I'd like to see Inspiration rebuilt as a dedicated Phantasm line, perhaps adding a bit more utility to Phantasms in exchange for some of the damage, and Illusions could be focused down a little more to allow for condition-oriented shatter specs. Just to end things on a more positive note, let me be really clear about this. None of these changes are worth re-rolling for. If you enjoy your Mesmer, and especially if you play either of the 2 top tier builds, stick with it. We'll endure and continue to thrive solely because we have the most useful collection of utility skills in the game, combined with some of the most balanced weapon skills in the game. Don't panic. You've got every right in the world to be annoyed with the changes, but unless you were already on the fence with the class, stick around. For those of you who haven't tried a Mesmer yet, I'd highly recommend giving it a go. It's one of the few classes that almost never gets turned down for groups, it's viable in every area of the game, and that's still true even after receiving probably the biggest nerf they've received since release. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about the changes, particularly the dedicated Mesmers among you, but I would like to hear the non-Mesmer perspectives as well. I understand that both rants and balanced discussion have the potential to incite some strong feelings, but I'd appreciate it if we kept the discussion civil. For the new subs and people who found this video somewhere other than their sub box, this is a community-oriented channel. We don't really do flame wars here, but we are big fans of discussion, so feel free to hop in and chat. Just keep it chill and we'll be good. That's all I've got for you today, folks. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it, go ahead and click the like button, and if you're new around here, go ahead and click subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Much love to each and every one of you, and have a tremendous day. Stay black.